Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. I just wanted to come out here at the beginning and let you know that there is no video for the interview portion of today's podcast, but there is video for the intro and the outro, and I think they're worth sticking around for. So enjoy this episode and let me know how you like it. Three, two, one. From window pane to window murder. I'm here today reporting to you live from in front of a window, where an invisible killer has claimed yet another victim. Eyewitness reports say it happened within the blink of an eye. Hi, yeah, I'm a bird. I was just perched over there when I saw it happen. It came out of nowhere. It's like you just hit an invisible wall. A window. Commonplace for you or me, but to an unsuspecting bird, it could be the matter of life or death. You know, from out here, it just looks like the sky continues. How are any of us supposed to know that it just ends like that? I think I knew the guy, man. I think he was like my cousin's girlfriend or something, but I can't believe he's gone. Really, a tragic story. But with windows being such an integral part of our architecture, there's really nothing that we can do. Back to you, Mike. Thanks, Mike. But you're actually wrong about that one. You know, birds hitting windows has become so commonplace in our lives that I'm willing to bet that each and every one of you listening to this right now has experienced it before. I know I have. I can recall a time while visiting back home and playing basketball with my brothers in the driveway. There was a thump on the backboard that wasn't the basketball. It was a Blackburnian warbler that hit the back of our transparent backboard. To this day, that is the only time I've seen a Blackburnian warbler. I find that pretty upsetting. 25 million bird deaths a year in Canada alone. It's an epidemic. It's enough to make a guy lose hope. But we're going to keep our chins up. We don't have to lose hope. And today's guest is evidence of that. So without any further delay, my name is Mike Bryden, and you're listening to Wilder Insights. Stay tuned.
My name is Michael Mesure. I am Executive Director and co-founder of the Fatal Light Awareness Program Canada, otherwise known as FLAP Canada.
So you said that stands for Fatal Lives Awareness Program?
Fatal Light Awareness Program.
Fatal Lights Awareness Program.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll get more into the lights about that later, because that's something I didn't actually realize when researching for this call, is how bad lights can be involved rather than just windows.
Yes. Well, you're the first, believe it or not, if that's the case, because the majority of people, when they know about the bird building collision issue, they tend to know more about birds being attracted to bright lights at night than they do collisions with buildings. In part because there's been such a tremendous amount of media coverage and research done now on the nighttime issue. So yeah, that's refreshing to know that you weren't aware of the nighttime issue.
I think it could be because most of my exposure that I've had to this issue is actually through personal experience. I've had birds crash into my windows and into the backboard of a transparent basketball net I had at home as well. Like,
wow,
just bad placement. Yeah.
That's how it is for most people. They've all experienced it, once or twice, sometimes too often than they would like, with their home windows, with their cottage windows. It's not just commercial buildings, right? It's anywhere you have glass when it comes to the daytime vision issue.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you're a co-founder of FLAP, and FLAP is 32 this year, I believe?
FLAP is 33. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. 1993. Yeah. So you're right. We're in our 32nd year, correct.
Coming to the end of the 32nd year, right?
That's right, very quickly.
Could you tell me how FLAP got started?
Right. Well, it's right back to the nighttime issue. I learned back in the late 1980s through a friend. He had heard something about birds flying into Toronto's lit towers at night. He told me because he knew I was always fascinated by birds, and I didn't believe him. How can this be? How can a city as big as Toronto not know about this? And I convinced him the very next day to get up bright and early before daybreak and drive down to the city of Toronto with me to see if this was in fact true. And sure enough, we pull up into the financial district. There on the sidewalk, I spotted several birds. I jumped out of the car and I disappeared into the night, left them in the dust. And everywhere I turned on the street, I was finding birds on the sidewalks. So I didn't realize it at the time, but shortly thereafter, I just was hooked. I just could not turn away from this issue. And here I am, like 30, 32, 33. No, for me, it's actually 36 years later. Still focusing on the issue.
So do you think that's something a lot of people get to see every day in Toronto, for example? Like, is everyone just walking around stepping over dead birds? Or because you were up so early, do you think it's something most people don't see every day?
Right. I do believe that if people were seeing this issue each and every day, this issue had been resolved a long time ago.
Right.
The truth is that, even before daybreak, a number of things can happen and do happen. Cleaners come out of the buildings to clean up the sidewalks. Scavengers, both before and after daybreak, patrol these areas because this has become an alternative food source for them. And so, and then those few birds that do survive, they'll hide in cover until they either succumb to their injuries or they'll try again to get out of this now concrete jungle. So very few people end up seeing them because of those reasons.
Wow. That sounds like a really depressing way to go after like being in shock, crashing on the ground and just trying to crawl away and hide.
Yeah. And, the sad thing is the research now that has been done on the mortality rate of these birds, we are detecting about 13% of the birds that actually do collide with the building. Many birds collide. They very quickly fly away. They don't even fall to the ground. But you can imagine, whether it's a nighttime collision with a lit structure or a daytime collision due to the reflective glazing, if we can compare it to us, if we were to run full tilt into a brick wall head first, you're going to have some pretty significant trauma. And this is what these birds are sustaining. There are various levels of head trauma. It's the most common cause of death is brain hemorrhaging. Also, what is a common cause of death and injury are things like ruptured livers, ruptured organs that just kind of, lack of a better term, they kind of explode when the birds hit with such force up against these surfaces.
Right on impact.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I wouldn't have even expected that. They just burst upon impact?
Well, you don't see it. This is all internal. The ruptures, the linings of internal organs are very thin for birds. Even the brain, the skull itself is much more thin than, say, a human skull is. So, and at the rate some of these birds fly, the force has to go somewhere. And unfortunately, these types of injuries, head trauma and liver ruptures, are very common examples of those injuries. Other types of injuries would be things like eye ulcers, where the eyes themselves bleed within the eyeball itself. There can be broken bones. There can be feather damage. There can be beak damage. For the longest time, when you talk with anyone about, I picked up a bird and it died and it's broken its neck, birds very rarely break their necks from impact. The portion of their spinal column at the neck level is very short, and the odds of them breaking their neck as a result of that are very, very slim. So like I said, it's right back to the internal bleeding of the organs and the brain itself.
I want to split this next question up into two parts because I believe we'll have a different answer. Do we know why birds are striking buildings here? And is it different for daytime and different for nighttime?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm glad you're stepping up and asking clarity on that, because they are two quite different issues. The nighttime issue is a result of bright light escaping from the interior of a building or being floodlit upon the exterior of the building. And for lack of a better term, these birds are attracted to that light, kind of like a moth to a flame. And when they encounter a lit environment, say like Toronto, it's not that they'll fly directly to that light source and collide with it. They tend to circle in that light source, and they become disoriented. They become emaciated. They just tend to drop to the ground with exhaustion. But then, once they gain their composure at ground level, they go to the lit lobbies of these buildings, and that's where they have direct collisions with the windows themselves, and that's at nighttime. During the daytime, it's two common themes. It's the reflective qualities of glass that give the bird the impression that this is a continuation of the environment, and they just fly toward that reflection thinking they're flying toward another tree. Or it's when the glass is highly transparent, where the birds can see to the interior of that building that might have plants in it, or it could be two adjacent walls of glass where they're seeing straight through from one side to the other to a tree or a brush, natural cover on the other side of that building. And again, the rate of impact during the daytime with a window is far more significant than that at night. So the death toll seems to be higher when it comes to the window collision issue compared to the nighttime collision issue. And statistically, the numbers of birds that die during the day period are just exponentially greater than those at night. And the reason for that is brightly lit, large urban environments, say like, Chicago, New York City, Toronto, they're isolated pockets of lit environments where windows are everywhere. Like the chance of a bird not encountering a building now that has glass is slim to none. It's pretty much a guarantee that birds are going to be encountering, especially during the migration season. So yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it.
And I bet a lot of people, when they think of birds striking windows, they picture something more common like a warbler or some small birds. But it's more than just that, right? Like hawks and even larger birds have the same impact.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm not quite sure what the total global species count is. Out of Cornell University of Ornithology, no, sorry, not Cornell. It's out of Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania. And I think it's around, I could be wrong here, but it's well over 1,200 different species of birds that have been recorded to collide with windows.
Wow.
FLAP has picked up 178 species of birds just here in Toronto. And the disturbing part about these species is, in the example of FLAP, 22 of them are at-risk species. These aren't, Canada geese. They aren't pigeons, and they're not starlings, which are examples of species that have adapted to the human-built environment. These are birds that, on the most part, are just traveling through a region to get to their breeding territories, or returning to the south to the wintering staging grounds, right? To the wintering grounds, I should say. And they just don't understand the built environment, whether that be nighttime or daytime. So it's no wonder that this has become such a significant problem. In fact, it's considered the second leading cause of bird death across Canada, second only to cats. Cats are number one. The other interesting thing is about birds in general, that kind of take this in a slightly different direction, is birding is the most popular pastime across North America, second only to golf. Golf is number one, birding is number two. That's how big this world of bird lovers are across this continent. It's massive, and we can ill afford to lose these birds for so many reasons.
So it actually transitions pretty nicely into my next question. I don't want it to sound too crude in asking this, but why should we care that birds are dying from this?
Yeah, look, the bottom line is we're already in a lot of trouble for so many reasons, but we lose these birds, we are in trouble. We as human beings are in trouble. Birds play a key role in controlling our insect populations. They pollinate our plants. They distribute seeds for regrowth. They provide food for other predators. All this gone out of our environment, out of our ecosystem, and it begs the question: is this how things are going to begin to collapse on us? Because without them, I just can't imagine what would happen. But put that aside and just kind of go back to the birding industry. Multi-billion-dollar industry. It generates so much for our economy. And the thing about birding, people picture someone out with a pair of binoculars and a bird book and a tilly hat counting birds. Well, there's a variety of different types of birders, and one of the most common ones are bird feeders. People have bird feeders in their backyard. You're considered a bird watcher. And you can try this yourself. Go into any big box store. It could be Lowe's, could be a home hardware, any hardware store. You can go to a grocery store. You can even go sometimes into a corner store, and all the product that they can sell on their shelves, you're pretty much guaranteed to see one of them be bird seed, because it moves off the shelf, and all that goes into our economy. So yeah, very, very important for so many reasons that we protect these birds, not only because we're doing the right thing, but because we're doing ourselves a huge favor by doing it.
That's amazing. As an animal lover, you wouldn't have to convince me that these birds dying is a bad thing, but coming at it from an economic perspective is something I've never heard before. That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. It's a huge industry. Lots of money. I'll add this to the mix of revenue being generated. There's such a shift now in the urgency to try and get on top of this concern. There's all kinds of cities across North America, which started here, actually coming up in Toronto, where it's now mandatory for new builds to meet bird-friendly requirements. And since that, combined with a few other things in the mix, including law, was introduced to protect these birds from collisions, industry finally saw an opportunity. We need to create product that can be mass-produced, that is proven to work at reducing bird strikes, so that as new buildings go up, at least we know those ones are safe. And now we have leading glass manufacturers, window fabricators and glass manufacturers that are producing bird-friendly product on mass scale. And all this, again, creates jobs, and it creates revenue in the way of sales. That all goes back into our economy again.
I wanted to ask you about BirdSafe. And is that a company that started through FLAP or one that began partnering with it? And I was wondering if you could describe what it even is.
Sure. So BirdSafe is, we'll call it a program in FLAP. It's a consulting arm of our organization that we created back in 2013. And the reason it started back in 2013 is FLAP found itself in two precedent-setting lawsuits. One in 2009 through 2010, and then another one in 2011, 2013, that brought two of this country's largest developers to court over bird deaths that were occurring at their facilities. In the second trial, that's where the law was introduced, designed to protect birds from collisions with buildings. And I'll get into the detail of that in a moment, but as a result of that law being introduced, mandatory requirements started to appear in cities across the world, across Canada, across the United States, actually. Consultants started to step up and see this as an opportunity to provide a service to their clients on how to retrofit their buildings to make them safe for birds. And we learned very quickly that they didn't understand the issue well enough to provide them with the right services. So we created our own consulting arm to try and make sure that the language was there, that the methodology was there to do it right when you assess a building to make sure it's being retrofitted properly, The methodology we created with experts all over the world, actually, is what we adopted and embraced in our methodology for providing this consulting service.
So the change that is being made to windows that are being put up in these retrofits, it's putting obstructions on the windows so the birds don't see it as like a clear path through, correct? It's so they're aware that something is in the way?
That's right. Yeah, and there's been a lot of research done on this now, and ad nauseum actually, and the vast majority of the various approaches to trying to land on what we'll call a formula, they all overlap. There's a consistent result. So the best way to look at making a window safe for birds, it's really no different to us. Next time you're out and about, you're walking into a large office building or you're walking into a mall, take note of what's on the windows in these massive lobbies, even on the doors themselves. You'll notice that there's something at eye level that stretches from one end of the glass to the other that creates a visual reference for us so that we don't go slamming into those windows. Birds aren't stupid. This is a lethal sort of illusion that we've created, and we as humans experience the same thing. If you type into YouTube, people walking into windows, you can sit and watch hours of videos of people slamming into windows. And so for us, it's relatively easy to resolve because these markers were all approaching the buildings at the same height, roughly at the same eye level. Birds are gliding anywhere on that glass to any height of that structure, actually. However, the bulk of bird collisions during the day occur up to roughly 16 to 20 meters above grade, which is about 5 to 6 stories in height. Above and beyond that, they tend to be few and far apart. And that's because these birds that end up consistently colliding at that level, they're moving through the tree canopies. They're gobbling up insects. They're eating seeds. They're eating fruit. They're hopping from one branch to the next. And as they fly to yet again another branch, they don't realize it's a reflection of the tree they just left. And that's how they end up colliding in that sort of hot zone between the 16 to 20 meters.
Right. Yeah, they are very hyper aware, and they need to be to survive the way they have for millions of years.
Exactly.
And yeah, in terms of migration or just birds in general, windows probably popped up overnight.
They did. You can't even measure it on an evolutionary scale. You can't. It happens so fast. I think it was in the mid-1800s when they started to perfect how to make glass even less apparent to the human eye. The polishing process and the manufacturing started to be perfected in the mid to late 1800s. So yeah, these birds have been migrating for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they just haven't a chance to adapt. And sadly, they won't adapt quickly enough. They just won't. At the rate that they're dying, it's incredible. The estimate for North America used to be over 1 billion birds. Now they've increased it to 3.5 billion birds every year dying as a result of collision with windows.
Wow, and windows. Sorry, and I was just going to say, okay, windows aren't even the number one offender, and the numbers are that high.
Yeah. Oh yes. Look, it's the jury's still out on which is the worst bunch. There's habitat loss. There's, as I mentioned earlier, cats. Cats continues to kind of be at the top of that. I'm biased, but I also look at the broad scale of potential for birds to collide with a window compared to that of feral cats or domesticated cats prowling in the environment. There are pockets where you will find a lot of feral cats and a lot of domestic cats on the loose. But even then, like I said, the odds of a bird colliding with a window is pretty much guaranteed. And I can't help but think that this is a far bigger in the way of numbers than compared to cats than we might think.
So large corporations and those who own skyscrapers are one thing when it comes to retrofitting their windows, but this is something that the everyday person can do at their home as well, right?
Certainly. In fact, cottages are responsible for about 50% of the problem. And this is the part we have to get people's minds past. We're all in this problem. This is not limited to commercial buildings or industrial buildings or educational institutes. Anywhere you have glass, you have the potential to harm or kill a migratory, or kill a bird, not migratory, solely. There are simple things that we can do, cost-effective things that we can do to make these windows safe for birds. And I started to touch on this, the formula, the spacing of a marker that you put on a window. Between each marker that you place, it cannot exceed 2 by 2 inches or 5 by 5 centimeters of a space between that marker. And the reason for this is these birds are extremely agile flyers, and they can slip through the smallest of gaps. So by placing those markers that dense together, the bird hesitates, and they'll slow, and they'll even think, you know what, I'm going to try and find a way around this visual barrier. Now, what that means also is the entire window has to be covered with that marker. It's unlike humans, like I said earlier, walking into a lobby where it's right at our eye level. So the entire surface of glass has to be treated, especially all that glass up to that 16 to 20 meters in height. Now, when we kind of picture this in our mind's eye, we're thinking, oh my gosh, we won't be able to see through our windows. You know, it's gonna destroy the beauty of the building. And I liked how my window looks when I look through it. I don't want to see markers on it. But there are some incredibly creative products out there now that have come up with patterns that are the least visually intrusive to the human eye, but meet the criteria of what it takes to make a window visible to birds. And you can be reducing, by adopting these products or these techniques, you can be saving 80% or reducing your strike by 80% or more, which is a lot of birds, especially when you're talking about some structures that are growing hundreds, sometimes thousands of birds in a given year. That's a lot of birds' lives being spared.
Yeah, I think when most people picture these markers you can put on your windows, they picture that like grid of dots, right? It's effective.
Yes.
But I was looking on your website, and you can there's some like beautiful design. You can make your windows into a piece of art.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting. That dotted pattern you just spoke about is the most popular bird collision deterrent out there right now that meets what research has proven to make windows safe for birds. Now, and that was produced in a partnership between Flat Canada and a company called Kaleidoscope, a company called the Convenience Group, out of the first trial that I mentioned back between 2009 and 2010, I think it was. And it was designed intentionally to have the least visual obtrusion, because that was by far one of the most important things for the building owners to see happen. And so it does it beautifully. But funny enough, my original pursuit in a career was going to be in architecture. And even way back when I was learning the basics of this, I thought, you know, why do all buildings look the same? We all have glass, and they're these glass cubes, and there's no creativity. And I always thought of looking at glass like a canvas. Treat it like a canvas. Make your building look unique. Come up with these beautifully aesthetic patterns that you can put on the glass that are also safe for birds. And it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, I feel like we see a lot of old architecture, especially overseas in Europe, and people question, like, why aren't our buildings art anymore? You know, and this might be a first step getting back to that.
I think so. And funny enough, in my conversations with architects through the years, they saw this as a threat to their creativity. They wanted to create a certain brand in their design. They wanted to, there's this fixation on glass and its shiny appearance that they just would constantly gravitate toward. So they saw what we were recommending as a threat. But as soon as it became law, or as soon as it became mandatory in certain communities, and it's just another checkbox that they as an industry professional have to fulfill, they could just go, okay, that's fine. Tell us what to do, we'll do it. And as a result of being made to do it, they're going, you know what, this ain't so bad. This is actually, in some cases, this is kind of cool. We can have some real fun here and come up with some really interesting designs on our buildings that make them unique, make them beautiful. And I think this is, with more time, this is the direction that's going to continue to go.
That's the definition of if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah, exactly. But look, in the case of where we first put the dotted pattern up on a building, this was back in the trial again, 2009, the building owner prepared a damage control program in anticipation of getting a flood of complaints from their tenants, from their shareholders, from the community. And so up go the markers, and they waited. And not a single complaint came through. So what they did is they did random interviews of their tenants and said, look, what do you think of these markers we put on the windows? And they said, what markers? They didn't even notice them.
That's amazing.
And so all these years of fighting, digging their heels in, saying this is going to destroy the beauty of our building, and nobody even noticed. So again, it goes back to mind's eye. We picture something in our mind that we think is uncomfortable, and we can't get our head past it until we actually try it. And then we realize, hey, this isn't so bad.
That's fantastic to hear. That's best case scenario, right? Like we're getting the work done that needs to be done to save birds, and it's not pissing anybody off.
That's right.
So besides retrofitting their windows with these markers, what are some things that people can do to get involved with saving birds or like being a part of the FLAP organization?
Oh boy, there's so much they can do. Like starting with your home is very important. Make sure that your home is an environment that welcomes birds and is safe for birds. And that starts by doing things like treating the windows with markers that are proven to work. Stay away from the bird of prey decals. This is one of the most, still to date, the most common purchased product for the average homeowner. Even commercial buildings continue to buy this product, the bird of prey silhouettes. I'm going to imagine you know what I'm talking about, the bird of prey decals?
I do, yeah. I'm guilty of it myself. Yeah. When I had a warbler strike my basketball net, I put the silhouettes on my backboard, but I guess I was wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's not that you were wrong. You were led to believe that this is a product that's going to fix your problem. And it's a perfect example of the power of suggestion. An individual goes out, they look for a solution. This is really, for the longest time, the only product that one could purchase. And they're told this will help prevent bird strikes. So, okay, well then I'll buy it. And it's cheap, it's easy to put up. But sadly, this research has concluded time and time again, unless a bird of prey decal marker is spaced the same way I described to you earlier, which is the 2-inch by 2-inch gaps between markers, it's not going to do the job it's designed to do. So we need to steer away from these products and go towards the ones that are, as I said, are proven to work. And something like the dotted pattern is an example of that.
Right on. So what about volunteering with FLAP? Is that something?
Oh, right. Sorry. Sorry. I didn't expand on that. That's right. So, make your windows safe for birds, but also think outside of your home. Think about your workplace. If you happen to work in a building that has glass, and I'm going to hazard a guess, probably 100% chance there's going to be glass somewhere in the building that you work in. Yeah. But there are going to be buildings that are likely to experience a lot more strikes than others. And you'll very quickly learn yourself, just by keeping your eyes open, keep your eyes peeled, especially during the migration season, as you enter and exit the buildings, and maybe take a stroll around the building you work in during this time. You're pretty much guaranteed to find the odd strike occur. Go to your building operator, go to your building owner and say, look, as a tenant, as an employee here, I want to make sure the environment I'm working in is safe for birds, and I expect you to do this. And then the direction this is going, like I said, mandatory requirements for municipalities. We now have a national standard called the Bird Friendly Building Design Standard that buildings are beginning to comply with. We have law that makes it illegal to harm a bird due to a collision with a window. There's so many pressures now for a building owner to take this seriously. and at the same time, look like a hero, for goodness sake, because it's doing the right thing. They need to do the right thing here by making sure that buildings are safe for birds. So just make sure that don't hesitate to speak up to your building owner and say, I need you to fix these windows. But most importantly, FLAP is trying very hard to get the mentioned bird-friendly building design standard into the National Building Code. Currently, it's not in there. It needs to be there. We need to make sure that all municipalities across the country, as they introduce more and more buildings with glass in their community or in their communities, that they're safe for birds. And the best way to do that is to get this to become mandatory right across the country through the National Building Code. So please, write the National Building Code. Let them know you take this issue seriously and expect the National Building Code to embrace this standard to make it mandatory for all new builds. And so everyone can play a role in this in a variety of different ways. And I think if we were ever successful enough to get this into the building code, oh my gosh, the floodgates would open in such a huge way for a change right across this country on a massive scale. So that I can't encourage people enough to consider doing that as well.
Is there somewhere on the FLAP website that directs people to where they can find like the agency that does the National Building Code?
Yes, you'll even see a history of letter writing that we've done. There's various contact information on there. It's on the section, I think it's called the Ontario Building Code, where you'll find it under, and it'll point you to a variety of ways to how you can help by writing certain departments of government to make this hopefully come to reality.
Can you tell me about the Lights Out program?
Sure. So Lights Out, there's a variety of different programs like this all across North America. The first city that introduced the first sort of Lights Out program was the city of New York. And I went down there, this was back in the mid-1990s, and kind of walked into the process of what we do in Toronto. And so they launched what's called Lights Out New York. Now, there are dozens of Lights Out initiatives all across North America. Toronto has its own Lights Out program now through the city planning department. And it's all about just encouraging people to practice responsible lighting control in an effort to protect birds from collisions with buildings at night. It's pretty simple. In fact, if you look at all the different environmental issues that wildlife faces today, you will never find one that is so easily resolved as a Lights Out program, because it really is as simple as a collective effort to reduce light as much as we can at night. That old flick of a switch. How often can you say at the flick of a switch you can save a bird's life? Because that is quite literally what it is. So it's just practicing responsible light control to minimize the light as much as you possibly can in a larger environment.
Yeah, we could probably make this conversation entirely about light pollution and the issues that comes with it, but
oh gosh, yeah, that's a big problem. There's so many aspects of light at night that is affecting the environment, affecting wildlife, affecting humans, and unfortunately, we have this. It's a combination of the fixation in bright light, and we have a false sense of security in light. We feel safer in lit environments, safer in lit environments in urban centers than darker ones. And statistically, it's been proven it's quite the opposite. That you're actually safer in a more dimly lit environment than you are in a brightly lit environment when it comes to your own personal safety and concerns of things like muggings and so forth. But that's another topic for another day.
I can recall a few years ago now seeing a video about the 9/11 memorial lights in New York City and the effects they were having on birds during migration, or just in general.
Yes. It's been down there a couple of times. It's quite a sight to see, actually.
Yeah. Do you know if those lights are still active? Like, are there still those two beacons?
Yes.
There are.
Yes. The way it works is there are these a whole network of extremely intense spots that create that are like the outline of where the World Trade Centers used to stand, and these are projected right up into the night sky to give the kind of an impression of, an outline of where these two towers used to stand and just dominate the cityscape. And New York City Audubon at the time, they stepped up and worked very hard with the Port Authority to practice turning those lights off if there are these events where massive number of birds are flying into and refusing to leave those pencils of light. And if you get a chance, you'll see it online. Type it in online, World Trade Center migratory birds, tribute and lights. You'll see video after video of just, in some cases, thousands of birds circling in these pencils of light, refusing to leave them. So the good news is that the Port Authority does now, when the numbers are great enough, they turn those lights off because they always turn them on in the fall migration, which is the worst possible time. But they turn them off, they wait till the numbers dissipate and the birds continue, and then they turn those lights back on again. So that's been proven to be an effective way at mitigating the concern of bird collisions. Or they're not collisions per se. They're just simply light attraction with these pencils of light.
That's really good to hear that they made change, because that's such a significant migratory pathway going over the state of New York and the whole eastern side of North America. I can imagine that'd be quite the distraction for migratory birds.
Oh, it is. It is. In fact, and forgive me if you're going to talk about this, but there's something called birdcast. Birdcast is at a Cornell University of Ornithology. It is followed, it's unbelievable the number of people that follow this particular website across the planet. And basically they use NextRad weather radar technology to track bird migration. And it allows Cornell to do these forecasts of when there's heavy migratory activity, so that organizations that, say, do lights out programs can reach out to the building owners and operators, hey, the numbers are high, turn off your lights. Or they can say, hey, there's so many birds now in your region, here's the videos to show what we're talking about, to encourage homeowners to treat their windows to protect birds. So it's proven to be quite an effective tool for outreach purposes, but it's also praised upon by birders because they know now that the next day might hold a perfect day for birding.
Right.
So it's a beautiful piece of technology.
I've got one final question for you, and I'm going to present it in kind of a scenario here.
Okay.
Say I'm out on my morning run. I'm out right at dawn, and I come across a bird that has hit a window. Two different scenarios. What should I do if this bird is already dead? And what should I do if this bird looks like it's still alive and it could possibly be brought in for recovery?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, first off, in both cases, let me just say, please consider downloading onto your cell phone what's called the Global Bird Collision Mapper. It's an app that allows you to report a bird building collision in the moment, on the go, anywhere you go across the planet. And it's already proving to be an incredibly valuable resource to track the intensity of bird collisions either in certain regions or at specific buildings. So if you get a chance, you can download this app off of birdmapper.org. Keep it on hand. I guarantee you, as you become more and more aware and look for birds, as you travel from A to B on a given day, you'll be amazed at how many birds you actually find and report into this mapping tool. This is what we call citizen science or community science. And it's proven to be one of the most sought after means of information in the research field. So you're contributing to research by entering these records into this particular app. But and as I said, that's whether you find a dead or alive bird. If the bird is dead and you're inclined to try this, you can simply pick that bird up and dispose of it. Depending on the region, they encourage you to bury that bird, but you can also just dispose of it in the garbage. But consider donating that specimen. Universities, colleges, and biology departments, museums will often take these birds off your hands for their research purposes. So if you're inclined to do that, I'd recommend giving that a try. If the bird is live, very important, just don't leave that bird laying there. A lot of people, especially if it happens at a home, they'll see a bird lying on their, say, their back patio, and they'll go, oh, I'm going to leave that bird alone, let it gain its composure, and fly away. Well, as I mentioned right at the beginning of this interview, these birds get scavenged very quickly. Your neighbor's cat could just very quickly pop over and take that bird away. It could be a crow that takes the bird away. It could be a raccoon. It could be coyote. Who knows? The list is massive of what can scavenge a bird off your own patio, or even on a city street for that matter. So make sure you pick that bird up. You contain it to, ideally, in something like a paper bag or a cardboard box. And if you're inclined to do it, see if you can transport that bird to a local wildlife rehabilitation facility. Let them take a look at that bird. Make sure that there isn't any injuries that they could tend to in giving that bird a better chance at survival. But please don't take that bird home and find yourself trying to nurse that bird back to health again. These birds, they need special care. They don't need to be fed. They don't need water. They need proper care. And the average individual just cannot provide that kind of care to these birds. So yes, like I said, best to send that bird to a rehab facility if you can find one in your community.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like there are so many stories you hear, and you could probably find a million videos on the internet of people finding baby birds or injured birds and, giving them a little bottle or a water tray.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, that's not what they need, right? It's something you need to leave to the professionals.
That's right. Exactly. Bless everyone's heart. They're hoping they're doing the right thing, but it's just not. It's not the type of care the birds need.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
I think that was a great conversation. I think we're okay to wrap it up here.
Okay.
If there's any last thing you want to shout out about FLAP or that you'd like people to know about, this would be the time.
Right. Well, I've said this already, but, I think people are often surprised at how many birds are, in fact, colliding, right within their own lives that they never noticed before. And it's like anything. It's like, wake up and smell the roses, if I can, for lack of a better term, use that term. When you start to look around you, and in this case, look for birds that have collided with windows, you will be surprised at what you see, what you learn. And, I think it's part of what motivates people to want to create change. Because if we only hear about it and we don't invest ourselves to learn about it, we won't necessarily invest ourselves in it. So, yeah, I just encourage people to keep their eyes peeled, go out there and look. And it doesn't mean you're going to find a bird each and every day, but every once in a while, you're going to be shocked at how many you find. And just to kind of give you a visual, our record at FLAP, we lost count at over 500 birds over a 6-hour period at just 2 buildings.
Oh, man.
And this was happening all across Toronto that day, not just at these 2 buildings, right across the city. So you can imagine I'm going to say hundreds of thousands of birds that likely perished in Toronto that particular 6-hour period on that particular day. So you'll be shocked. You'll be shocked at what you find if you look.
This seems like a very urgent movement when you put it that way, because there might be a lot of birds in the world, but losing numbers like that every year, we can't sustain that.
Exactly. They cannot sustain they just cannot sustain this, period. And especially when they're facing so many other causes of bird death. It's no wonder the populations are plummeting all across the continent, all across the world. And, for me, I don't know. I mentioned the, how they benefit us, how they benefit the economy and help the environment. But birds are beautiful creatures. They're precious. I mean, they inspire our music. They inspire our artwork. They inspire us to go out and buy bird feeders so that we can enjoy them in our own backyards. We don't realize how much we take these birds for granted. And we just can't afford to let it continue this way. We need to give back and do our part to protect them. So I'm hoping I made that impression on people listening today.
I agree with you 100%. And what FLAP is doing and the message the organization is sharing, it really brings me a lot of hope. And I hope other people get to see that from our conversation.
I do too. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Mesure is the co-founder and executive director of FLAP Canada. If you want to read more about FLAP and see what Michael and his team are up to, you can check out their website, which I've linked down in the show notes. On their website, you can learn what you can do to help stop unnecessary bird deaths and what you should do if you find an injured bird. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow Wilder Insights on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you find your podcasts. And if you don't mind, consider giving us a rating. It helps support the show and helps others find us. Wilder Insights is partially produced at the Mesure radio station, located in Prince George, BC. If you're in this neck of the woods, you can check out the show every Thursday at 10 a.m. on the Mesure radio station, 88.7 FM. Our theme music is by the band Funeral Culture. Check those guys out. Wilder Insights is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Mike Bryden. You can find our socials and our email down in the show notes below. So if you have any questions or want to suggest a guest for next episode, shoot me a DM on Instagram or send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Remember to get outside, ask questions, and I'll see you in the next episode.